Uh, Thanks, Joe. And thanks, everyone. I was a little disappointed when I pulled up because I asked Cassie to have a microphone and a stand and some speakers that would carry my message outside as well, and none of that is here. So I was a little mad about that. But it was weird because she hit me up on Facebook and she's like, "Can you come and share?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll tell my story." And she's like, "No, I want you to share on the third step." And I'm like, I don't even think that's really appropriate for me to share on, even though I've worked it. My understanding of, God and higher power is not conventional, so to speak. But I'll start with my first round of steps. When I came in, I was brought up with religious parents. They're still super religious. My mom's involved with the church. She does the readings at Mass. And I grew up with the certain concept of what God was supposed to be, and it was the religious thing, and He's always watching, and don't do this because He'll get you, and, it was like fear-mongering almost. And then I started using it. I never actually took the time to think for myself. I was just like, okay, it's whatever they tell me it is. So when I came into recovery, that's what I thought it was. I was going to church with my mom and, listening to stuff. But it's weird, like the cloud or whatever, wore off. The fog lifted, and I was like sitting in church one day, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. I can't buy into any of this anymore. And I worked the first round of steps, kind of still having that, but slowly developing my own understanding of something. And my parents left to Poland, because that was another thing. I was scared. I was like, if I change this thing that I'm doing, like with the religious thing, they're going to hate me. And they already hate me for doing all these things during active addiction, stealing from them and just putting them through hell, I had like that whole entitlement thing going on. I was the youngest of three, and they gave me anything I wanted, yet I still stole stuff, which didn't make any sense to me. But, most of the stuff I did in active addiction doesn't make any sense, because they call it insanity, not because it's like completely rational and reasonable. It's because it was pure craziness, I was driven by that, what the basic animalistic level, in psychology, that would be like probably the id, Why'd you do that? I felt like it, And then in recovery, they're like, that's not really a good excuse of why you did something, Can you back that up with why you did that? And I was like, maybe, and I had just like forced to think. So my parents went off on vacation to Poland, and I started visiting other religious places, like outside of my denomination. And I hit a bunch of different things, and eventually I landed on the one that made sense to me. And the one that I landed on happens to be a non-theistic one. They don't have a concept of God. And I was like, you can do that? I'm like, that's blew my mind, because I was like, here in this fellowship, you guys saved my life. The steps saved my life. And then I'm like, wait, I don't have to have one? I don't have to have an understanding of this thing? And so my second set of steps, which is what I'm on now, I'm working those without any type of God or higher power understanding whatsoever. It's just, me and what it is, me in recovery. And I'm taking a psychology of spirituality class, and sometimes I have to do things outside of my recovery to kind of make sense of my own experience. And we talked about like how certain awakenings are different, like there's one that's vertical, and then there's one that's horizontal, and the religion I was brought up in is more like the vertical, I'm down here, God's up here. I work the steps, and maybe I could get union with God, or, some type of aspect of God. I could be one with the divine, and I've had that experience, and it was like, okay, cool, and then the next one was like, kind of what I'm at now. It's like the horizontal, everything is connected. We're all the same, everything's the same. We're all made of the same stuff, It just made a lot more sense to me to do that. So when I share about the third step, it could be both. I could do the bottom to top or side to side. It really doesn't matter. The thing was, what I had a lot of trouble with at the beginning was making decisions. I didn't know. I had a set route I would take every day to work, and I wouldn't deviate from that route. It was like, I got to go up this street, make a right on this street. It was super rigid. All my thinking, every action was just rigid. There was no flexibility in anything I did. So one day I was in the midst of my 90 and 90, and my sponsor's like, let's go for a bike ride. I'm like, that's not really in my schedule. I'm going to make a meeting in the morning and then one at night. That's it. He's like, no, you're coming for a bike ride. And absent of the fact that I was still a smoker at the time and we rode like 50 miles and I was dead at the end, he's like, well, let's get some coffee and recharge. I'm like, we're going to be late for the meeting. He's like, you don't have to go to a meeting today. I'm like, you're fired. You are not my sponsor anymore. What kind of sponsor tells me not to go to meetings, And then we sat around and had coffee and he explained some things to me about, hiding out in the rooms, and maybe I was doing that, maybe this rigid thought process that I've adopted maybe can have some leeway. And that was the day I kind of learned a little bit, okay, meetings are super important. Do I have to go every single day? Absent of the fact also that recovery has given me a job, like Katie talked about, that I love, calling. I work with kids on the autism spectrum. I don't even think it's work. You know what I mean? I teach these kids how to be social. We go swimming to the store and the restaurants, This is my life, It's just what happened, From being a junkie shooting dope to people trusting me with their kids. Hey, you want to go pick up my kid from school? You want to teach him how to swim? And meetings, I make as many as I can. Recently, somebody called me out on it. They're like, you only go to meetings when you're speaking. And I was like, that's not true. Just for the past 3 weeks it has been. But other than that, it's not true. So, I try to make 3 a week. Sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3. But I do other things in this program as well. I work these steps with people that I sponsor. And that was the thing I learned, about the rigidity thing. Is there's different aspects. I go out there and I practice these principles from the steps in real life. So when I make decisions now, they're not all from a place of disease. They're from a place of especially if I do things from a loving kindness place, then my things are good. The second time I worked this step, somehow I lost the desire to control anything. I was just cool, that's cool too, because I can't change something unless I first accept that it's happening. If I'm denying something is even happening, there's no chance of me even fixing it. I'm not in the solution, I'm in the disease and I'm in denial. So I think my friend just posted on my wall, live every moment as if you have chosen it, And that's kind of what the third steps taught me. I just don't think that there's some kind of magical plan out there for me. I don't think things are held in suspended animation until I arrive. God put this in my place. Well, I don't really think it was held in suspended animation until I got there and then reanimated. Just, my mind won't allow that. I know things go on when I'm not there. I know that my belly button's not the center of the universe. I know that I don't have some type of privileged position in the universe. And I think that was kind of my goal with the third step, was to get rid of that self-centered thing. All these things revolve around me. I was just talking about death. When I came in, I was like, oh, they took him from me. God took him from me. Now it's it's just a part of life, and death isn't even death. You're still going through decay, which is more life, So I just keep seeing more aspects of the bigger picture. When I came in, maybe, the analogy I would use is I'd look out the window and my disease thinking was like a golf ball. That's all I could see, especially in addiction. It was ways and means to get one more, So it was golf ball size. It was I had these blinders on. I wanted one more. I really didn't care how I got it. Then I started working some steps, going to meetings, and maybe my perspective expanded to like, a tennis ball. And then I could see a little more of the bigger picture, and we use that saying around here, like, he couldn't see the picture or couldn't see the forest because he was staring at a tree kind of thing, so my perspective kept getting bigger. And when they said, like, to be aware is to be alive, I kind of took that to heart. I didn't think it was just some catchy saying that people said. I thought maybe I should expand my awareness, obviously outside of myself, but first in myself. So after learning how to make better decisions, I was scared of the fact that I could develop something from my own understanding, because that threw me for a loop. Because we say, on one hand, my best thinking got me here, but then you want me to develop this concept from my own thinking when my own thinking got me here. It's paradoxical, and something's got to give. We have a lot of those here. Tie a knot and hold on, let go and let God. Which one is it? So it's weird, right? I mean, we do these things, Don't judge anyone, stick with the winners. Well, how are you going to know who the winners are? So, life is littered with paradoxes. That's why I didn't even want to share on this step, because it's just like so abstract, and trying to put it into like some type of functional framework is just really hard, because God, okay, let's say I'm using the vertical one, right? I'm here and God's here. Well, then God would be everything anyway, right? But he's not limited to everything. So what does that mean? Then it brings me back to the one that I choose to do, which is the horizontal, where just everything is here, and I can accept it or I cannot. My life just becomes easier when I accept things. And, the universe is under no obligation to make sense to me, nor does it ever ask my permission to do anything. That's also my entitlement. Why did this happen? And, I got to find an answer. No, I don't. Some things just happen without ever my permission needed, So things happen. I mean, I can either be cool with it or not. That was the first prayer I think I used when I was in recovery. Was like, whatever happens, just let me be cool with it, And at first it was like, God, I love you. Please just do this my way, and then I'll owe you one later. Cool? And now, if I was going to say I had some kind of thing, now it's just like, I put some unrealistic demands sometimes on myself. Like, you got to do this, you got to hit a 4.0, you got to do this. And then I realized that's kind of silly too, because I got a B in one of my classes, and, I could have really lost it had I not had like a third step where I was just like, well, now what? Your perfection thing's gone. What are you going to do now? And I was like, just going to keep trying to get more A's, and whatever after that. I really don't care. So I still managed to do that. I managed to hold on to a job for almost 2 years. I got Employee of the Month. I'm doing research on chronic fatigue syndrome, working for a definition that's actually might be in the DSM one day at DePaul. I'm part of the team. It's like, holy cow, when did this stuff happen? Sometimes I don't even have enough time to slow down to appreciate all the things that I've gotten in recovery. But, I find time to do that. Usually on Sundays I'm off, and instead of doing what I used to do, go to church, now I just sit at home and reflect on all the great things that, my life has become. I managed to, like I said, the job, the Honor Society. I'm looking into grad schools now for a PhD. And you keep in mind that I was a junkie whose nephew was like 5, would come into my room and have to pull the needle out of my arm and wipe the blood off my arm and be like, can we go to the park? And I'd be like, your Uncle Ted's sick again. Sorry. And it was always conditional. So then when I started doing step 3 and I started just accepting things the way they are. And I think my journey can be summarized in this, because I think I got 2 minutes. it started with trust, right? Because I think that's the basic principle here and what I'm leading up to. It started with authoritative faith. I had an authoritative faith. It came from outside, from people I put on pedestals whom I thought were better than me, because I didn't have any self-worth. Then I realized these people are just people. And yeah, maybe they went to school and stuff, but anything any of you are capable of, I'm capable of. And anything I'm capable of, anybody's out there is capable of. That's what makes us human, you know. The outcome may be different, but we could definitely put in the effort. Then comes reasoning. So for me, reasoning happened after that, when I started working on my own definition of stuff, you know, like, is it this, is it that? You know, the second time on one of the questions, like, what can God do for you, or what has God done for you? I just wrote nothing, you know, because I really don't think he exists. And my sponsor's like, okay, next. And, you know, nobody's shocked by this anymore. It's just my journey now, you know. Because of the steps, I've become empowered. And, you know, the way we're talking about it in psych is like, you know, God is that thing that you need, that I needed a lot of the time. And then when I became empowered, and, you know, I didn't need it anymore. It was just something that, you know, it was like the drugs for me. It was like a crutch. And now I don't need it. So now I just have trust that whatever happens, I have the tools to deal with it because of the steps. The steps have given me the tools to handle life on life's terms. And, you know, that entitlement thing is kind of gone, you know. I'm in a relationship with a girl who's not in the program, and it's just great. She practices the same spiritual path that I do. You know, I met her at the place where I meditate, you know, and it was like, hey, do you want to go out to dinner with me? She asked me, and I was like, okay, you know. Next thing you know, we've been going out for, you know, a couple months now, and things are great, you know, and I don't expect her to be anything other than who she is, you know. And that's the same thing kind of like what I want for you guys. I don't want anything from you. I would just like to see everybody become the best version of themselves they can be without the use of drugs. Because as soon as drugs are added into the equation, all this third step, first step, any of it goes right out the window, you know. And then we're selling our best selves for one more. And that's not something I want to do anymore, you know. And I hope you guys feel the same way, and I'll keep coming back.